and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, I'm going to share my technique for creating ombre effect embossing. So with the holidays coming up, this is a really great technique if you want to DIY hand letter your greeting cards or use this technique for any holidays throughout the year. So it's really fun. It looks super impressive. You can see we've got this nice gradient or ombre look going on. So I wanted to share my technique. I've got a few tips to share on getting the most out of your embossing powder and making sure that you retain as much of it as possible so you don't have to throw a bunch away with all of them mixing together. So I've got kind of a specific step-by-step to make sure that doesn't happen. So we're going to recreate this one right here, the sweet one, but you can see I've got it with green and I've got it with red and orange right here, and I've even integrated a little bit of gold embellishments on these. So I'll show you how I do that too. I'm using a brand of embossing powders called Stampendous. I don't super love them, but I don't hate them either. I do like that they came with a bunch of different colors so I can experiment a lot. They were super affordable, and I'll leave a link to all the products that I mentioned in this video in the video description, so check there if you need any links for anything. Okay, so this embossing powder, the gold one, is actually Ranger brand though, so just to be clear on that. I'm gonna move all these out of the way. So I've got my blues right here. I've got my dark blue, my light blue, and I've got my white. I'm gonna set my gold aside for just a moment. I've got my embossing pen. This is a Ranger brand embossing pen. It's clear. And I've got a few sheets of just scrap copy paper right down here, which you'll see what those are for in just a minute. And I'm using Astro Bright's brand cardstock. I like how rich black this cardstock is, and it's pretty sturdy. So I really love using this for my embossing. And it makes those lighter colors really stand out when you emboss them. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. So I'm just gonna jump right in and get started. So I'm gonna write out my word sweet on here. Okay, so we can just start putting our powder down. So I always work my way from the bottom to the top when I'm creating this effect. So I'm going to start with my darkest color first and kind of just lay it on the bottom. And you want to, however many colors you have, you just want to kind of eye so it's evenly mixed. Or if you'd like your bottom to be a little higher, just make sure you're leaving room for those other two colors on there. So I'm going to try and create mine pretty evenly spaced. So I'm just going to lay this down really gently, dropping this powder on here. Okay, so after I have it, I'm going to tap it. I'm going to move it this way so it just falls down. I don't want to get it on any of my other clear letters up here. So I'm just going to tap it a few times. If you have any stray areas, like I've got a few between the T right here, sometimes it's really nice to have the little pieces here. It looks a little more crafty and handmade. But if you don't like them, you can tap it a few times, or you can use a paintbrush and just come in here and kind of knock them away. Static electricity kind of gets on there and makes it stick pretty good. So we've got that. You can see I got some on my E right here that maybe I didn't really want there, but I think we'll be able to cover it up pretty well with the lighter blue. So I'm just gonna set this aside. I'm gonna grab my paper, grab my little container, kind of fold it in half, and drop my powder back into the container. Okay, so you can see, let me cap this off first. You can see there's still a little bit of remnant right here, and when I use this paper again for the lighter colors, I don't want the darker color mixing into those. So I'll just take this, I have a trash can nearby, and I will just wipe it off with my hand into the trash can. So I start with a fresh sheet of paper without throwing the sheet of paper away. Okay, so on to the next color. I've got my light blue right here. I'm going to lay it down and repeat the exact same steps, so I will speed up the video. Okay, so we're on to our last color, which is the white. So I've got one small tip. When you're reaching the top and you're on your lightest color out of all of them, I'm going to lay this down. Make sure you get any of the areas that are remaining, any of the clear areas, so everything is covered. And then instead of tilting, let me move this right here, instead of tilting this like I have been downward here, I'm going to tilt it the opposite way, because if I tilt it towards me, there's a chance that it'll pick up some of these blues as it moves down. And since this is my lightest color, I want to avoid getting my darker colors in my white as much as possible, because I want to hold on to this embossing powder and really make it stretch as far as possible. So in order to avoid that from happening, I'm just going to tilt it towards me this way so it just falls wherever there's white. Tap it a couple of times, and that's looking really good. And you can see that really beautiful gradient really obviously on here. So I'm going to dump this back into my container, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now it's time to zap this with our heat tool. I'm using a Martha Stewart brand heat tool. Doesn't really matter what brand you have. I do like this one though. It's kind of loud though, so I'm gonna speed up the video and you'll see me converting this from powder to that more heat embossed look right here. Okay, so we've got it all set here. You can see it's nice and shiny now. And you could call this finished if that's where you'd like to stop. If you'd like to add these more metallic embellishments on like I have here, I always emboss this part first, because the more powder you have going on, the more likely you are to touch a spot and kind of smear the powder. And then because you have this gradient, it's a little more difficult to get it looking right again. So I like getting my gradient totally done. And now if I ever need to touch the paper here to avoid touching my powder that I put around it, it's a safe place for me to touch with my hands. So that's why I always do this part first before then moving on to this part. So just a little tip there. I'm just going to put these on. These ones are super basic. I'm just going to do these little curlies because it makes sense with the word. Okay, so now I've got my little decoration around my word, so now I can just put this over top the entire thing so I can make sure all of my little pieces get covered. Okay, so it's okay to lay this all on top because the gold is the only powder that I have on here now. So I can just tilt it, make sure all of my design areas get covered. And because we cleaned off this copy paper each time, we know we only have gold on there. And you can see I've got some stray areas right here, so I can go in with my paintbrush now and kind of tap these away. Or if you like the look of that, you can keep them too. It's just dry air and static, keeping it on there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna dump my gold out and then I'm gonna zap it, so I'll speed up the video for the rest of this. Okay, so that is my technique for creating ombre embossing and adding a little bit of gold embellishment at the end. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design tutorial every single Tuesday. And don't forget to check out the video description for a list of all the products used in this tutorial so you can check them out or pick them up if you'd like. For more holiday-inspired design tutorials and freebies, head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.